Welcome once again to Bradbury 101, where today we reveal Ray Bradbury, the unstoppable rewriter, as we look at his 1955 book, The October Country. In a previous Bradbury 101, I explained how Bradbury's lost book, Dark Carnival, had turned up rewritten as The October Country some 8 years later. You may want to go back and look at that video where I discuss some of the best stories from Dark Carnival. According to Bradbury's poetic intro to the book, The October Country is that country where it is always turning late in the year. That country where the hills are fog and the rivers are mist. That country composed in the main of cellars, sub-cellars, coal bins, closets, attics, and pantries faced away from the sun. That country whose people are autumn people, thinking only autumn thoughts, whose people passing at night on the empty walks sound like rain. Just a recap from the Dark Carnival video that I did, Bradbury took his Dark Carnival stories, removed 12, and added in 4 to form The October Country. The first edition of The October Country has a cover illustration by Joe Munieni, the artist who by now had become strongly associated with Bradbury. In typical Munieni style, the cover shows magnificent townhouses, a strongly prevailing wind, a character whose face is concealed, in this case what appears to be an old woman, and a fantastical element, some strange salamander, apparently out for a walk with the old woman. Some editions of The October Country also have interior illustrations from Munieni, and if you're familiar with the earlier Golden Apples of the Sun, you'll be familiar with the line drawing style that Munieni uses here. So, onto the table of contents for The October Country. Mostly stories carried over from Dark Carnival, but interweaved are those 4 new stories, ones which had appeared in magazines since the publication of Dark Carnival. The table of contents is bookended by 2 of these new stories, The Dwarf and The Wonderful Death of Dudley Stone. The Dwarf had first appeared in Fantastic in 1954. Bradbury's name and title made the cover, although the illustration on the cover is nothing to do with Bradbury. But the story had a wonderful interior illustration by Sanford Cossin, and Bradbury was introduced with a blurb that seemed to compare him with Dickens, and called his story a fine one and a clear plea for compassion. In the story, a carnival dwarf makes secretive visits to the Hall of Mirrors, where he hopes to see himself looking like other people. The book illustration for the dwarf is much more surreal. For once, the Munieni character doesn't have a concealed face. Instead, there are multiple reflections of his face from the Hall of Mirrors going off to infinity, each one more distorted than the last. The Wonderful Death of Dudley Stone first appeared in a woman's magazine, Charm, the magazine for women who work. The story deals with a writer who is struggling with fame. Munieni's illustration in the book seems to capture 2 facets of this character. On the one hand, a writer who has clearly ascended to the peak of his profession and his abilities, but who on the other hand seems to want to throw it all away. The remaining new stories in October Country had also appeared in magazines 1 year earlier. The Watchful Poker Chip first appeared in Horace Gould's Beyond Fantasy Fiction. Oddly, although Bradbury was quite a well-known name by this time, he's not on the cover. But inside the magazine, the story has a delightful illustration from Vidmer. Munieni's book illustration is again somewhat more abstract, but includes many of Munieni's distinctive features, the stars in the sky, the cityscape, and in the background there, a representation of the sun, and possibly a snake. Touched with Fire first appeared in Maclean's, Canada's national magazine, in 1954. The story deals with a couple of old men who see it as their purpose in life to solve other people's problems. In this case, they're concerned that the temperature in the city is today so high that there will be angry outbursts. They track down and harass one Mrs. Shrike, a character beautifully captured in the illustration here, and also brought to life on television, first by Joe Van Fleet in Alfred Hitchcock Presents in 1956, and again by the wonderful Eileen Brennan nearly 40 years later. The scripts for both of these TV appearances were written by Bradbury himself. Those two magnificent Bradbury scholars, Jonathan Eller and William Touponce, in their book Ray Bradbury, The Life of Fiction, unveiled the extent to which Bradbury rewrote the stories in the October Country. Skeleton underwent light revision. The Scythe underwent light revision. The Cistern underwent major revision. The Crowd was lightly revised. The Man Upstairs majorly revised. The Jar had light revision, and Homecoming had light revision. And of the remaining stories, several more that were lightly revised: The Next in Line, The Lake, The Small Assassin, The Wind, There Was an Old Woman, and two more that underwent major revisions: Jack in the Box and Uncle Einar, and one which was completely rewritten, The Emissary. Bradbury's introduction to the October Country made it plain that this book was a reconsideration of Dark Carnival, with improvements and additions. And it's a book which clearly benefits from the remarkable final polish Bradbury brought to these stories.